The knife slipped from the butter, clanged against the sink, and I stared at the screen like it belonged to someone else. Notice of benefit suspension, the subject line screamed. I clicked. One sentence. No greeting. Effective immediately. Your pension distribution of $4.5 million is suspended pending review. That was it. 21 years of deferred salary gone at 7:02 a.m. on an ordinary Wednesday. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, across the kitchen. My daughter paused mid-step, holding her gym bag, eyes narrowing. "Mom, are you okay?" The toaster kept ticking. Burnt rye filled the room. My mind scrambled to explain. Maybe it was a clerical error, a glitch, or someone pushed the wrong button. But deep down, I knew better. I opened the PDF attached to the email, eyes scanning the bland cruelty of HR language. Somewhere around the fourth line, I caught something odd. A CC line. Someone had copied the message to an address ending in @sec.gov. My pulse paused. Had HR just looped in the Securities and Exchange Commission? By accident? I blinked twice. Then forwarded the message to Lila Farmer, my former attorney and the only person I trusted with what this meant. Subject, urgent. No explanation needed. "Mom?" My daughter tried again. I cleared my throat. "Just a work thing." My voice came out calm, too calm. "I need to make a call." While I booked a 9:30 a.m. video meeting with HR, I found myself retrieving the butter knife, gently wiping it with a dish towel. Pointless habit. Maybe, but in that moment, I needed to hold something steady. Outside, the garbage truck hissed down the block like nothing had happened. The city kept moving. But for me, time fractured. I stared at the screen one last time. 21 years, one sentence. And whoever wrote it thought I'd just take it. They had no idea who I was, and they sure as hell didn't know what was hidden on page 47. By 12:30 p.m. the same Wednesday, the coffee had turned cold, but my anger still burned beneath a tight lid. Crestfall's HR director, barely 30, framed by a motivational poster, popped onto my video screen and offered a plastic smile. "Ms. James, our decision to pause certain pension obligations is merely a cash flow strategy," he said, as if deleting $4.5 million from my future were a line item on a lunch receipt. I kept my tone level. "A strategy that required no warning?" He shrugged. "Market volatility, capital allocation, you know the drill." The drill. The phrase yanked me back to 2:09 a.m., September 16, 2008. Fluorescent lights buzzing. Traders dozing on keyboards while I rerouted credit default swaps like a field surgeon cauterizing arteries. Victor Lang. Then a frantic VP clung to my sleeve, begging me to keep Crestfall from bleeding out. I did, sleeping 3 hours and 48, persuading the Fed to extend an emergency line, designing the hedges the firm still markets today. The memory receded. The HR director was still talking. Oblivious. I hit mute so he couldn't hear the click in my throat. "Unmute. Sorry," I said evenly. "Send me the full policy rationale in writing." He agreed too quickly, ending the call with a rehearsed promise of transparency. The screen went dark. The kitchen felt like a forgotten wing of a museum. I strode to the hall closet, crouched, and dragged out a cardboard archive box labeled Post-Crisis Docs. Dust spiraled through the sunlight. Inside, wrapped in red legal tape, waited Amendment 6, 2009 Pension and Governance Addendum. I drafted it after watching Victor sign bonuses for himself while janitors were laid off. Distrust had a way of sharpening my pen. At my desk, I slit the tape, flipping past audit findings, compensation schedules, board resolutions, page after smug page, until page 34 stopped me cold. Victor's signature, bold and unmistakable, sprawled beside mine, attesting he had read every clause. The ink bled slightly where his pen lingered on the G, proof he'd hesitated that day. A pulse of satisfaction rippled through the fury coiled in my chest. Ignorance would not be his defense. I pressed my palm against the paper, feeling the grooves as if they were warm. Somewhere deeper in the document lay page 47, the silent weapon I'd embedded to protect employees who'd protected Crestfall. But page 34 delivered something just as valuable. Victor had willingly armed me. The kettle clicked off behind me, unnoticed until now. I poured reheated coffee, welcoming its bitterness. There would be time to unleash page 47, for the moment. Knowing Victor had signed his own trap kept the lid on the fire. Just a little longer. Before shutting the box, I snapped a photo of the signature, attached it to a new email for Lila, and typed, "Proof attached. Call me at 2:40 p.m. No further explanation." The door to Lila Farmer's office clicked shut behind me with a soft finality, like the beginning of a verdict. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon oil and ink, lawyer air, sterile and sharp. Lila stood waiting with a thick folder in one hand, and in the other, a glass of water I hadn't asked for. She'd always known when I needed hydration more than heat. "I read it twice," she said without preamble, placing the folder on the glass table between us. "You were smart to include it. The clause is real, enforceable, and, if activated, immediate." I leaned forward as she turned the binder toward me. A yellow sticky note marked page 47. She tapped it once. "This is the one that changes everything." I read it again anyway. In the event that any deferred pension obligation, once contractually agreed upon, is revoked, suspended, or otherwise terminated, a 10% voting equity transfer shall be executed in favor of the aggrieved party via pre-authorized escrow held by Baldwin Trust. And beneath that, in finer print, said breach shall also constitute a default under Executive Guarantee 12774, thereby triggering immediate repayment of any outstanding corporate debt secured via personal collateral. Victor hadn't just signed his way into handing me 10% control of Crestfall Capital. He had unknowingly secured the firm's skyscraper lease with his own home. "Can they contest this?" I asked. My voice was flat, but beneath the surface, I felt the kind of steadiness that comes when fear finally burns itself out. "They can try," Lila said, flipping the folder shut, "but they'll lose. And if you activate this now, the shares are yours by morning." That fast? I had assumed 2, maybe 3 business days, but Lila held up a form with a timestamp and smiled grimly. "Baldwin's system upgraded this year. Digital validation. If we send it by 5 o'clock, the trust processes it before 6 a.m. tomorrow." I stared at the cursor on her screen. The execute transfer button glowed like a fuse. "Are you sure you're ready?" she asked. For a second, I wasn't. My breath caught. Not because I feared the fight, but because this wasn't the version of retirement I'd imagined. I'd pictured Vermont, sunlight, quiet, not retaliation written in legalese and escalated by keystroke. Still, I nodded. "Yes." Lila clicked. A soft chime confirmed the transfer was submitted. Outside the window, the skyline began its golden descent into dusk. Somewhere, Crestfall's board was enjoying cocktails, unaware that 10% of their kingdom now belonged to the woman they tried to silence. I sat back, cold water untouched. The war had not yet begun, but the first blow had already landed. I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. After Lila submitted the transfer, I came home and watched the city lights flicker and shift through the blinds like a heartbeat I couldn't slow down. My laptop sat open on the dining table. I kept refreshing the Baldwin Trust dashboard every 15 minutes. Waiting for confirmation, the system had registered my name. The silence was unreal. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that buzzes in your ears when you've lost too much blood. At 1:42 a.m. I tried to draft the shareholder speech, but my fingers hovered over the keyboard. Stiff. I'd spoken at dozens of quarterly meetings. This time, I couldn't write a single word. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because something inside me refused to believe this was really happening. Marie stirred in the hallway, bleary-eyed, her robe dragging behind her. She didn't ask questions, just poured tea and placed a hand on my shoulder. That was our ritual. Quiet care when words wouldn't land. 3 weeks ago, we'd canceled our retirement trip to Oregon. The cabin deposit was refunded, but the dream wasn't. Marie had stepped away from her job temporarily after her blood pressure spiked. Stress, they called it. I used to think retirement was a horizon. Now, it felt like a mirage someone else was drinking from. Refresh. Still nothing. Then at 4:06 a.m., it appeared. The transfer had posted 10,006,218 shares. Fully vested. Voting enabled. A breath I didn't realize I'd been holding escaped slowly through my teeth. Not relief, just verification. This was real. The firm that erased me now had to answer to me. 20 minutes later, so would the board. Baldwin Trust automatically notifies all directors when a material shift in voting power occurs. 10% isn't a blip, it's a tsunami. And in the hands of someone like me, it's a declaration of intent. That's probably when Drew Patel, former chairman, now sidelined, reached out. I'm behind you. That man's done more damage than anyone knows. A minute later came Len Carter. I'll support whatever motion you bring forward. I wanted to believe both, but I remembered how easily Len had pivoted in past votes. I flagged his message. Noted, not trusted. Victor would know by now. He'd seen the alert too. It wasn't just about stock anymore, with 10%. I could call for a no-confidence motion at Friday's annual meeting. And like clockwork, at 4:43 a.m., another buzz lit up the screen. Victor would like to speak with you before the meeting, discreetly. Outside, a siren wailed far off toward Midtown. Inside, I poured stale coffee, opened a new file, and typed 5 words. Promises broken, power returned. Permanently. Victor Lang always kept his office 20 floors above the rest of us. A subtle reminder, I suppose, that his view came at a premium, but as I stepped through the glass doors that Thursday afternoon, I didn't see power. I saw a man trying too hard to sit still. He rose too quickly, extending a hand I didn't take. Morgan, he said, feigning warmth. Thank you for coming. I thought it might be best we speak off the record, face to face. I said nothing and sat down. His assistant closed the door behind me, too slow to hide the nervous glance she gave him. Victor leaned forward, elbows on mahogany. Let's talk practically. What happened this week? Your pension? The notification? None of it was personal. It was a timing issue, that's all. We're realigning long-term obligations with short-term market risk. He smiled like a man explaining math to someone who'd failed the test. I let him talk. He continued. Look, we can restore your pension, most of it. 4.5 was always generous. How about we reinstate a clean 1.5 million, call it goodwill, and move forward without public tension? He slid a leather folder across the table. Inside, a new agreement. Neat, polished, sanitized theft. I didn't touch it. Instead, I reached into my bag and removed a small voice recorder. Already running, I placed it gently on the table and pressed play. HR's voice, crisp and unmistakable, filled the room. Per the executive memo, use the phrase cash flow reallocation strategy. Do not mention pension restructuring or individual targeting. Victor paled. The recording ended. I picked it up, placed it back into my purse, and stood. You said you wanted to speak off the record, I said calmly, but I don't believe in off the record anymore. His mouth opened, but I didn't stay to hear what came out. I walked out of his office, each step a quiet defiance. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. The elevator hummed as it descended. On the ground floor, as I crossed the marble lobby, something caught my eye through the street-facing glass. Two men in gray suits stood beside a security guard, clipboards in hand. One pointed to the building's exterior. The other scribbled notes. Their jackets bore the gold insignia of Barrowgate Bank, the lender who'd underwritten Crestfall's real estate debt. The key lock writer was live. The second domino had fallen. I didn't smile, but something inside me settled. They thought cutting my pension saved them $3 million. Instead, it triggered a clause that could cost them their headquarters. I stepped into the wind outside, cool against my skin. And for the first time all week, I didn't feel small. I felt accurate. Friday arrived like a starting gun, not a sunrise. By the time I stepped from the subway and turned the corner onto Madison, the sidewalk outside Crestfall's revolving doors had mutated into a living press release. Employees waving cardboard pension signs, TV crews jostling for angles, curious pedestrians filming everything. Security tried to funnel me through a side entrance, but I stayed on the main path, letting the cameras record every step. A protester recognized me, shouted, "This is the woman they shortchanged!" And the crowd erupted. The roar didn't rattle me, it sharpened my breathing. Inside the marble lobby, a clerk handed me a scarlet badge, proxy representative for 3.1% of the float, collected overnight from retirees too angry or too tired to attend. I pinned it below my lapel, felt its weight like the beginning of armor, and crossed toward the elevator bank. The trading floor's jumbo ticker glowed an accusing crimson. Crestfall down 14% at the open, another 5 sliding while I watched. Each tick lower was a metronome counting Victor's remaining excuses. Conference doors were supposed to close at 9 o'clock a.m. sharp, but at 9:01 a.m. a nervous aide announced an unforeseen technical delay that violated Article 7, Section 3, timing set in stone to prevent exactly this sort of stalling. I noted it aloud to the corporate secretary, made certain my voice carried to the reporters being ushered to the side balcony. While staff scrambled with microphones that didn't need fixing, Victor remained unseen. His absence painted desperation he couldn't mask with polished statements anymore. I opened my phone, reread Drew's midnight text, steadfast, and Len's hesitant thumbs up, still unsigned. The chessboard was lit, pieces were moving. A junior assistant in a rumpled suit hurried across the aisle, cheeks blotched. "Ms. James, Mr. Lang asks for a few additional minutes," he whispered. Then, lower. He also asked me to tell you privately that his personal accounts were frozen by Barrowgate at 7 o'clock a.m. I don't know what that means. I thanked him, though the courtesy tasted metallic. Victor's liquidity crisis was the click of a second hand on the detonator I'd set in motion. The audience would never hear that detail from me. They'd read it on filings later today. Still, awareness sharpened my focus the way a surgeon feels the heartbeat through latex gloves. The moment the stage lights finally came up, I drew a breath measured in metronome beats, not emotion. There would be no fury in my words, only architecture, clauses, dates, signatures. Anger could wait. Precision had to speak first. As ushers signaled the board to take their seats, the ticker behind the dais flashed another crimson downtick. Falling numbers, I reminded myself. Our gravity applied to arrogance. Somewhere above these chandeliers, servers were issuing margin calls, and somewhere across town, a padlock clicked shut. The storm was widening on schedule. I fixed the proxy badge on my blazer, rolled shoulders, and strode toward the podium as the chairman called order. The ballroom dimmed just long enough for the projector to flicker to life. I took the stage with steady steps, not rushed, not theatrical. I didn't need drama. I had the law. Behind me, the screen illuminated a single document, centered, unblinking. Voting share transfer agreement, executed via Baldwin Trust. And beneath it, in bold, 10.21% voting power now held by Morgan E. James. For a moment, there was silence, not confusion, computation. The board, the press gallery, the institutional investors. They weren't shocked. They were recalculating power dynamics in real time. Then the room cracked open. Victor shot to his feet, face drained, voice struggling to rise above the swell. "This is out of order. She has no standing to—" I raised my hand. Calm. I clicked to the next slide. The clause from page 47, word for word, line by line. In the event of suspension of retirement benefits, a 10% equity voting transfer shall be executed. Gasps. Phones out. The legal counsel 2 rows down paled visibly. And then, the doors in the back opened. A courier from Barrowgate Bank stepped forward, followed by 2 uniformed court officials. One held a sealed manila envelope. The other read from a clipboard. "Mr. Victor Lang, you are hereby served formal notice of collateral default. Your residence at 192 Riverside Drive is now subject to asset recovery under the terms of Executive Guarantee 12-774. Click. Dozens of cameras fired at once. Victor didn't sit. He couldn't. His body locked in a strange half-turn, as if trying to escape a moment that wouldn't let him leave. The screen shifted again. This time, a live feed. Outside his Manhattan brownstone, deputies affixed a red seizure sticker to the wrought iron gate. A single strip of yellow tape fluttered across the camera view. I leaned into the mic. My voice didn't rise. It cut through. "That's what happens when you skip a page." Silence. Not from shock this time, but awe. Power had shifted, and everyone knew it. I stepped back, relinquishing the floor. The room didn't move for a beat. Then, like a wave, conversations erupted, board members whispering, media scrambling for angles, and shareholders refreshing stock apps that were now surging with volatility. 6 minutes later, phones across the room buzzed simultaneously. Page 47 was trending, not just on finance Twitter. Everywhere. People wanted to know what a 63-year-old woman just did to a billion-dollar empire with 1 forgotten clause and 2 decades of memory. Victor slumped into his chair, not from fatigue, but defeat. I didn't look at him again. My attention was already elsewhere. Justice had spoken, and it had used my voice. Night settled over the war room like a cool compress after fever. The board had recessed long enough for cameras to clear, but adrenaline still pulsed in the air as we regrouped behind closed walnut doors. The chandelier's reflection trembled in polished mahogany. Outside the glass, Midtown's lights flickered in uncertain sympathy. The corporate secretary cleared her throat. "Ms. James, quorum is present. Shall we proceed?" I nodded, refusing the chair offered to me. Victor sat at the far end, flanked by counsel, his tie slack, his future narrower by the minute. Motion 1. Director Alvarez moved to remove Victor Lang from every position for breach of fiduciary duty. I seconded. Ballots flashed on digital tablets. The tally returned 11-1. Even Victor's cousin abstained. A weight I hadn't known I was carrying slipped from my ribs. Motion 2. Appoint Elaine Park, our ethics chief, as interim CEO. Elaine, petite, steel-spined, reddened under the sudden spotlight. She'd spent years cataloging violations no one wanted to read. Tonight, those receipts mattered. The vote was unanimous. I faced her. Keep the lights on, keep the books open, and keep every promise we ever put in writing. Her crisp nod felt like sunrise. A director offered me an at-large seat. I declined. Control was never my destination. Accountability was. Restore every suspended pension. With interest. Publish the plan before Monday. Heads bobbed. Some looked almost relieved to receive orders they didn't have to invent. Council announced one last item: Victor's golden parachute, 24 million in cash and stock, void under ethical misconduct. With a single tap, it evaporated. The sum reclassified to the retiree trust fund. A collective hush slid across the table, followed by a soft exhale. Numbers on a screen becoming food. Medicine. Mortgages for families who had counted on promises. I met Victor's eyes once. No triumph. Only completion. The calm that comes when a locked door finally clicks behind you. Elaine adjourned at 9:40 p.m. I gathered my coat, feeling the strange lightness of a diver resurfacing, lungs burning but alive. In the corridor, an intern handed me a press release. Crestfall Capital reaffirms commitment to retirees. I folded it unread and walked toward an elevator that, for the first time all week, seemed to be waiting only for me. Outside, the city hummed with its usual Friday chaos, yet each horn and footstep felt kinder. I inhaled the cool air, tasting possibility. For the first time since Monday, a full breath reached the bottom of my lungs and stayed there. 7 days after the vote, I sat beneath a studio halo light instead of a boardroom chandelier. Bloomberg's green ticker scrolled behind my shoulder. The anchor called Crestfall's turnaround the comeback no algorithm predicted. I spoke in measured tones, no gloating, no sharp edges, just the facts. Pensions restored, governance reset, and a promise that no clause would ever hide on page 47 again. CNN followed that afternoon with a segment titled Silent Justice. They replayed the moment Victor was served and then cut to me explaining why the loudest power is often the quietest. Viewers wrote in, praising calm over spectacle. I accepted the compliment. Yet what I felt wasn't modesty. It was the grounded certainty that I had simply finished work I started in 2009. Emails poured in from former colleagues. Brenda, a receptionist laid off last year, said the retroactive payout meant she could keep her childhood home. Carlos, a systems analyst, confessed he'd been weeks from foreclosure. Their gratitude landed not like applause, but like proof that numbers on spreadsheets translate to roofs. Prescriptions. Tuition. Every message echoed the same refrain. You saved more than money. You saved our dignity. Even my risk model interns, now scattered across Chicago and Houston, sent a group selfie holding a handmade sign that read, Page 47 paid our mortgages. Their beaming faces felt like compound interest on integrity. For me, utterly priceless. On Wednesday, a discreet lunch with Meridian Values Capital, a heavyweight ESG fund, took place in a sunlit corner of Le Bernardin. Their managing partner slid a term sheet across linen. Head of Sustainable Risk Strategy. Unlimited research budget. 4-day work weeks. I smiled, recalling Oregon cabins and watercolor plans, and asked for 48 hours. That night, another proposal arrived, this time from Crescent Equity, Crestfall's longtime rival. Their letter was blunt. They would acquire Crestfall's distressed assets at a premium, but only if I agreed to serve as non-executive chair for 3 years. No Morgan, no deal. The irony tasted sweet. A week ago, I'd been expendable. Now I was leverage worth 9 figures. I stepped onto my balcony, Manhattan humming below, and reread Crescent's conditions. Chairmanship would let me cement transparency policies, mandate living wage audits, and lock the pension plan in an irrevocable trust. Blueprints I'd drafted on sleepless nights. Pride flared, not as ego but as validation. The quiet kid from Akron who outcalculated a crisis could now set the scoreboard's rules. At dawn, I drafted 2 emails. To Meridian, grateful, but not this season. To Crescent, I accept, contingent upon my reform package becoming part of the purchase agreement. I hit send and watched the sun ignite the East River. feeling the rare warmth of a decision aligned with every lesson I'd learned. When the phone rang minutes later, it was Elaine laughing through tears. "They just agreed to your entire list," she said. "You're officially the house architect." For the first time in decades, the word retirement didn't sound like an ending. It felt, unmistakably, like earned freedom. 3 weeks later, the hum of fluorescent lights felt strangely comforting as I stepped onto the modest stage of West River Community College. Sunlight slid through tall windows, pooling over the fresh banner, the Morgan James Endowment for Ethical Risk Management. Students, faculty, and a handful of retirees whose pensions had been restored filled the hall with a gentle expectancy. I told them how numbers are never just numbers. They are rent checks, chemotherapy copays, nights of sleep. I handed the podium to Dean Alvarez, who announced the first 5 scholarship recipients, one by one. Their faces flashed across the projector: young analysts in thrift store blazers, single parents studying after shifts, a veteran rebuilding a future. Each smiled like dawn itself. Behind those slides rolled photos viewers had emailed me since the hearing: a mortgage statement stamped paid, a little girl hugging a stuffed bear purchased with a grandmother's back pay, a retired machinist repairing his porch with wood he could finally afford. Their gratitude washed over the auditorium in quiet waves. Nobody clapped, yet every chest seemed to rise a little higher. After the ceremony, a student asked what winning really feels like. I paused, hearing the echo of trading floors and boardrooms long gone. "It feels like breathing," I said, "exactly when you thought you might never catch your breath again." The answer satisfied her. It surprised me. That evening, back at my apartment, a thick envelope waited on the entry table, addressed in Victor's unmistakable script. No return address. I weighed it in my palm, felt its edges, then slid it into a simple black frame and hung it opposite my desk, unopened. Some pages are safest unread, reminders rather than stories. I brewed tea and opened my phone. A new message from Elaine, a photo of the Crestfall Corner office, my battered ceramic mug, white with faded navy numbers of an ancient risk formula, sat in the far right corner of the CEO's desk. No caption. None needed. I exhaled, a release deeper than relief, closer to gratitude. Standing by the window, I finally saw the city the way tourists do: possibility instead of pressure. Oregon's coastline could wait. For now, freedom meant choosing, not escaping. If this journey proved anything, it's that quiet persistence can outlast noise, and buried truth can still move mountains, especially when page numbers say otherwise. Your voice, your claws, your unseen footnote might be the hinge history swings on. So tell me, what's the page 47 in your life? Share your story in the comments. Hit like if you felt the pulse of justice tonight. And pass this video to someone who needs a reminder that silence is never surrender. And if you want more tales where calm courage wins, subscribe. Our next chapter is already turning. Together, let's build a library of victories written one hidden clause, one steady voice at a time. Click the bell so you won't miss when quiet persistence makes headlines again, because that moment might be yours. Stay, witness change together.